thank you all for being here and for the opportunity to engage with Carmen, a little bit of conversation about the church and its future. So I'm just going to turn things over to Blair, and I'll be quiet for a while.
Thank you, Trina. Hello, friends. I'm happy to be with you. It's good to see you all. As I say, many of you I have a relationship with, and I just want to gather you. It's so hard to not be able to kind of visit you where you live and breathe and have your being. So that's hard, but being able to see you this way is really good. I want to acknowledge that I live and work and try to do the church, be the church better on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people and the Kakite First Nation in New Westminster. I often say that our story is held by an even more ancient story in generous hospitality, and I say thank you for that. And if you would like to put in the chat and acknowledge the lands where you live and work, please feel free to do that. I'd like to share a couple of texts from the scriptures that came to me as I was thinking about the town hall today. And then I'll say a few things, and then we'll pray together, and then we'll hand it over to Carmen, and we'll go from there. So let me first share these words from Paul. We know that the whole creation is groaning together, suffering labor pains up until now. And it's not only creation. We ourselves, who have the Spirit as the first crop of the harvest, also groan inside as we wait to be adopted and for our bodies to be set free. We were saved in hope. If we see what we hope for, that isn't hope. Who hopes for what they already see? But if we hope for what we don't see, we wait for it with patience. In the same way, the Spirit comes to help us. We don't know what we should pray for, but the Spirit pleads our case with unexpressed groans. The one who searches hearts knows how the Spirit thinks, because the Spirit pleads for the saints consistent with God's will. And we know that God works all things together for good for the ones who love God, for those who are called according to God's purpose. And so if anyone, reading in 2 Corinthians, is in Christ, there is a new creation. Everything old has passed away. See, everything has become new. All this from God, who reconciled us to God's self through Christ and has given us the ministry of reconciliation. That is, in Christ, God was reconciling the world, not counting their trespasses against them, but entrusting the message of reconciliation to us. What does it mean to be called? Now, we know that the American author, novelist, poet, Presbyterian preacher, Frederick Buechner describes call as the intersection between the world's greatest need and your great gladness. What you love and what the world needs combined. That's the place of vocation. The Latin vocare, which means to call. This is what I hope and pray that you all do in your day. Spending your days at the intersection of the world's great need and your great gladness. My father used to say to me, love what you do. You'll spend a lot of time doing it. And if we take Jesus at his word, I came that you might have life and have it abundantly, then surely call has to be part of that. I believe I first met Carmen Lansdowne at an annual general meeting of BC Conference. I want to say Penticton. She might correct me. So that would be some years ago. Not the most recent Penticton meeting, but the one before that. And you know how it is when you meet someone and when they're out of earshot, you turn to your friends and say, now who is she? How do you know her? What's she about? Everyone I spoke to about Carmen at that meeting spoke about her laser focused commitment to learning, her love of and challenge to the church, her Indigenous roots in the work of healing. And every time I've encountered Carmen since that first meeting, this has been my experience. She is razor sharp smart with a doctorate from the Star King School for Ministry. She's piercingly observant. She's kind and generous. She's hilarious. And she's a wonderful friend. And she brings her experience, her charm, her unfailing grace and hope to every conversation, to everything she turns her attention to. For these and all sorts of reasons, I believe part of nominating Carmen to the role of moderator of the United Church at this time in our history is about the wisest thing I've ever been asked to do. And I'm grateful that Keith Simmons thought it was a good idea too. Besides, Carmen nominated me for president of this region, so I think turnabout is fair play. Talk about walking, living, breathing the sense of vocation that Buechner writes about. All things working together for good. Carmen is called to the reconciling work of Christ to help us be a better church. Before Carmen shares, let's pray together. Holy, gracious God, it's a wondrous thing that you have placed in our midst a servant leader who's been called to this time. It's even more remarkable that she said yes. And so we give you all thanks. We give you thanks that Carmen has agreed. We give you thanks that we can watch and be part of the discernment of the church. We give you thanks for Paul, who focused us on the reconciling work that you do in the world. May we be part of it in all of this. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Hey, Carmen.
Hi,
How's it going?
It's good. It's busy times. Thank you so much to Blair and to Trina for asking me to join you for the town hall today. And I see at least 3 of the directors from First United Church Community Ministry Society, and Elizabeth is also the chair of First United Church Social Housing Society, but on the board of the Ministry Society. And so thank you for coming to support me. Many of you I know by name, and many of you I have not yet met, but I know that because of this region's deep commitment to First United historically, that many of you follow closely what we do at First United. And so I want to first acknowledge that we're in the middle of some really big things here at First United. And in terms of my willingness to serve in letting my name stand as a candidate for moderator, that comes with the blessing and trepidation of my boards, because it would mean taking a step back if I was called by the church to serve in this way. And I want to acknowledge that that is meaning extra discernment and extra work and thoughtfulness and prayerfulness on the part of our boards. And so especially for the 3 of you that are here today, I want you to know that I see that impact on you and the uncertainty that it creates while we're in this time of discerning together. I already put into the into the chat that I'm here at First United's temporary administrative offices in the downtown east side and on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, the Squamish, Nikum, and Hunkaminam speaking peoples of this part of Vancouver. And you know, it's an interesting time for me at the moment. I'm spending currently probably about minimum of 15 hours a week in design development meetings with architects and lighting consultants and acoustical consultants and interior designers, trying to rush towards our deadlines with BC Housing for redeveloping our property here at First United. And also, this was the year that I was eligible for my 5-year sabbatical leave, and I had some plans for that, and so I'm still, you know, hoping to do that this spring. I had a moment where I was like, maybe I should just work until the end of General Council and see what happens. But I'm grateful for my personnel committee, and Jennifer Goddard-Shepherd's on my board too, and she's on my personnel committee. So I have 4 directors here plus Trina. For, you know, encouraging me to honor that and to use that time for rest and learning. And so there's a whole bunch of things that I'm working on to try and make space for myself to be really grounded and present. And now one of my goals during my sabbatical will be able to be providing times of like focus and reflection as we go through this like new virtual general council together. I'm grateful for Graham Brownmiller and his leadership as the worship chair for General Council. We have opening worship this weekend, and I, you know, have always been grateful for Graham's friendship and leadership in the church, and he's become the person I turn to for polity questions and, you know, how things work in the restructuring of the church, what sort of happened while I was finishing my PhD, and I had finished serving on General Council Executive. And so, you know, I'm still learning to also live into this new structure of church that we have in a way that it is, you know, as it is for all of us. It's new times and a new world. You know, there was a time when I knew the manual inside and out and how the different course of the church interacted with each other. And I'm still sort of trying to learn that on the fly as I'm working in this incorporated ministry. And so when Trina reached out to me in the fall on behalf of some others to test whether or not this nomination was something I would consider, the fact that it came through Trina as somebody who you know, attends my board meeting, is the person who's accountable for making sure that our ministry at First United is sustainable and healthy. I think if it had come from anybody else, given everything that's on our plates at First United right now, I probably would have said like, you're crazy and maybe later, but not now. But I knew that if Trina was bringing this call from the church forward to me, knowing everything she knew about what was on my plate, what's happening at First United, and that she had already been through her own process of discernment and weighing the potential for me to be elected into this new form of service and the impact that that would have on what's already happening at First United. And that affirmation that yes, it was still something I should consider was a huge, it weighed hugely in my decision to enter into discernment. I will say that at first, you know, that sense of call to consider a nomination did come externally. It's not something that I had certainly thought about, and certainly not for this general council explicitly. And so I also happened to be in Beausejour, Manitoba at the time, attending a board meeting for the Sandy Soto Spiritual Center, which is our Indigenous theological training school. And I'm deeply grateful to Stan McKay, the former moderator of the church from 1992 to 1994, because I called him on that Saturday afternoon and said, this has just happened. I'm 2 hours from your home. Can I come visit with you tomorrow? And we just sit on your land and talk about what this might mean for me and what it might mean for the church. And to have his guidance and wisdom as an Indigenous elder and as a former moderator also weighed into what it might mean for me as potentially the next Indigenous moderator after him, if I were to be elected in this role. And of course, I consulted with my mother and my partner and my children. Many of you on this call will know that my 11-year-old is neurodiverse. He's on the spectrum. And the past year has been so difficult as he's learned about the legacy of residential schools, because it's been so present in the media through the confirmation of the graves. And he has been very forthright, as he always is, about everything, about his anger at the church. And, so going so far as to say, I will never step foot in a church ever. And I said, well, that also means that you're saying that you don't appreciate Camp Spirit and you don't appreciate Camp Firkham, and that these are also legacies of the church, and that there are things that are hard and difficult about the ways that the church has been complicit in the harm perpetrated against Indigenous people in Canada. But there is also goodness and healing and potential for new relationships. And I don't think things can be quite that black and white. Has also played into my own discernment and prayer around so that this is the right time, because the church has been a place of deep healing and safety for me, at the same time as I have experienced like overt and covert racism, and I see the ways that the church is still fallible as an organization, and we hurt each other over and over again through our human fallibility and the way that we make decisions and structures that are not life-giving. And I don't think that's a reason to discount it all, because there is, for me, this salvific hope that we cannot see, that we can get it together and do things better. Blair, I loved what you said at the beginning of today around why would we hope for what we can see? And, I don't know what the answers are for us as an institution, as an organization. I do see the ways in which our congregations are suffering, and our clergy are suffering, and our lay servant leaders are suffering in the messiness of living into a new structure, in the ways that just like when you build a physical structure and you're like, oh, that does not look exactly how I imagined it in my mind. I imagine that there are many ways, many more than I know of, that has happened with the restructuring of our church. I'm deeply and viscerally aware of the way Stan put it, is that the restructuring of the church has set the Indigenous church adrift with the loss of P-Wayton Presbytery and the All Native Circle Conference. Even though we have the National Indigenous Council, I think that the impact on the Indigenous church has been huge. And I think the restructuring of the church and even decisions we made before that around elimination of transfer and settlement has had really deep impacts on the rural church that are hard to address. And I hear that desire for us to discern together, maybe we made the best decisions that we could with the information that we had at the time, but there have been real impacts for certain sectors in the church that remain unaddressed. And I'm really interested to go into this general council and to listen to what has changed since the last general council, what's gotten better, what's gotten worse. And then of course, just the really profound impact of the pandemic on every aspect of life. I belong to social media groups with other clergy and other lay leaders in the church, and we are all facing COVID fatigue in life in general, and being tired of not being able to see our extended family as much or as easily as possible, and having to physically distance and not hug the people that we love, whether they are chosen family or family of origin. And I hear and see the frustration and tiredness of people who lead worship having to figure out again that the ground has shifted underneath them, and we're back to online worship, or are we not? And having to constantly be in a place of shifting and discernment has made everybody weary. And we have large numbers of lay people who are facing that same exhaustion in whatever their chosen vocation is. If they're small business owners, if they are adjusting to working from home, if they are retired and they had planned to travel or engage in hobbies or volunteer service, like everybody's plans have changed, and we still don't know what the future holds, right? Like this idea of managing COVID in a way like we manage the flu, and that we may just have to adjust to, this is a thing that some of us will have, and that vaccinations will protect us somewhat, but we're never going to eliminate COVID in the same way that we have done successfully with smallpox, or even reduced to the level of measles or polio. And so there's all of these big existential threats and questions that we're dealing with at the congregational level, in outreach ministries like First United, and then in the national church. And never mind the things that we used to be worried about, like the changes in our society around centering of Christendom and things like that. So it's definitely, no matter who the church calls into the role of moderator, it's not going to be easy, but it's not going to be boring. And so I'm just aware of, in my own busyness and trying to cross the finish line so I can get into the listening sessions and to be really present to what the church is saying, and figuring and discerning like how I might respond and what I might say to these different contexts that we're facing. That I am in a deep listening phase, and those are some of the things that are surfacing for me as I think about the context of the whole church, and what I might be being called to if I was elected as moderator. And so I will also say that I'm deeply grateful for the very, very strong affirmation that I've had from people in our region and across the country about my nomination. So many people have reached out as things have been more public in the last week or so. And that I'm also really open to the ways in which the Spirit moves through our church and its decision-making processes. And there's a lot of ambiguity in that, right? Like we have these processes in place where we call each other to be in community with each other and having conversation, and that those conversations and debates shape our decision-making processes. So we don't allow to vote by proxy. You have to be physically present in the room to make decisions. And sometimes that can lead us into new and wondrous ways of being that we could have never decided if we voted the way we went into a room with our minds made up. And it also can create a lot of ambiguity when the national church makes decisions that wouldn't necessarily be the decisions that an individual community of faith might make, and that there is grace and unknowing in all of that and how it fits together. And so I'm open to what will come. One of the other people I consulted in my discernment process was David Giuliano, who was moderator when I started serving on the General Council Executive, and or he was elected at the first General Council that I attended as a member of the General Council Executive for the World Council of Churches. And he gave me some really great advice that I have to be prayerful in preparing for all of the ways that I could lose and all of the ways I could win. In the last General Council, there were like over 10 candidates, and we had several runoff elections. And he was like, that being eliminated on the first ballot will feel different than being eliminated on the last ballot. And have you prepared for each of those iterations of what that might look like? And, no matter how you think you might have prepared yourself for the fact you may be called, if you were the winner, then still have to be prepared for it in that moment. Like, what will that really feel like? And I know because of the new structures of the church that there's still a lot of wait and see, that I'm the only nominee so far. And so a couple of people have said to me, like, well, do you think you'll win by acclamation? And I thought, well, geez, I hope not for the church, but like, oh, there's another way that, I never thought about, like, all the ways that I could win. I just assumed that there would be like 8 to 10 other people that would also be expressing their gifts and their vision for the church. And so I'm also, my mom and I have been reflecting on it a lot. And she had said to me, what feels good to me about this is what she said, is that you're not grabbing at anything and you're not running from anything. You're not trying to leave. You're not using this as an opportunity to leave first without just being honest about the fact that you would be ready to go. And you're not like running towards something in a way that seems unhealthy. And another person had asked me if I wanted to be the moderator, and I said, I'm not sure want is the right word. Like, I've never been the moderator of the church before, and no matter how much I might discern with or alongside previous moderators, I know if I was the moderator, it would be my own experience. And so there is so much unknowing in that. But I do know after all of this prayerful discernment that I would be willing to serve in that role. And if I wake up on July 23rd and somebody else is elected, I would be very happy to resume building a new building at First United. And that feels good and healthy too. So yeah, that's where I'm at so far in my discernment. I'm really looking forward to the opening of General Council and being really present to that process. And yeah, so thank you to Blair and to Keith and to everybody else who has played a role in my discernment, and to Trina for conveying the ask. And yeah, I don't know, I don't want to take up the whole town hall, so I don't know what the plan was for if we're going to have some question and answers, or we have other agendas. So
thanks, Carmen. See what I tell you, friends? She is razor smart and thoughtful and discerning and charming and caring and compassionate and all those things that I think that leadership calls for in our church today. So yay. Trina and I are deciding between the two of us who's going to moderate your questions. So Trina, I'm good to have you do it, and I can pay attention to people's hands going up at the same time as well.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, at this coming February 13th, so coming up very quickly, is the opening of the General Council 44. And this year, the General Council 44 is going to be happening completely online over a period of months. And so it's quite a different model than how we've done things in the past. And it is a different time to be a candidate for moderator. And we really do appreciate you bringing forward your gifts. As I said to you in our conversation, I feel like this is the right time, and you are who we need right now. And I'm just so grateful to you for making what will be personal sacrifices in order to put yourself forward in order to serve the church in this way. So I thought as we're on the cusp of General Council 44 and thinking about some of the denominational shaping questions that are before us at this meeting, and Carmen, who may be in a position to lead us into the future, if you've got questions for her or comments that you want to make as we embark on this journey as a church in the next few months. You can just raise your hand or unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. Now I know you guys are not shy. Come on. Was that John Clement from Ladner?
This is not a deep, meaningful question, but just to relate that as I was listening to Carmen, listening to your, I like the idea, you're not grabbing, but you're not running. You're in a position where you would be very happy remaining at your current vital work. And while not wanting to be moderator, you're willing to be moderator. This is completely off topic, and I hope it's a bit of a light relief. There's an old but very bad Canadian joke. First prize 1 week in Toronto, second prize 2 weeks in Toronto. That may apply in this case. You could take first or second prize as far as I can see, and that's all. The future of the church will have to go over to some of you more serious-minded people. I'm signing off. Now, I'll be in the meeting. That's all.
Thanks, John.
I mean, that was the first thing I said to Trina, is like, I'm not moving to Toronto. And I've raised like the many ways that COVID has impacted the church, and I think that it has allowed the church, the general council offices to really, it's forced the general council offices to really reimagine what working together looks like. And so that is one, I guess, I wouldn't want to call it a silver lining, but an opportunity or a way in which serving at this time has become an opportunity I could say yes to right now at a time when I'm not willing to relocate permanently or even for a 3-year period to Toronto. That some of the time I would be working in the general council offices, that will look like working from home. Or working from Vancouver at least. So being able to be home with my family more often than in the before times, when there was sort of an expectation that you would spend a third of the time in Toronto and a third of the time traveling, that requirement to be away 2/3 of the time is away. Because I also, like, my parents are getting older, my kids are still in elementary school, and so I have a grumpy puppy who's growling at somebody in the background. And I love Toronto, so it's not a dissing Toronto.
It's actually true, Carmen, that this has opened the eyes of the church that we can do things in a new way, and has definitely made opportunities in the general council office more available to those of us across the country. Positions that would have required people to move are now being offered to people to do from home across the country, which I think can only be better for us, because it just opens up a broader pool of people and leaders and volunteers. Matt, and then Ross.
Thank you, Trina. Hi, Carmen. You and I haven't had a chance to actually meet face to face. I think we've exchanged an email or two. I'm out at Cloverdale in Surrey, and what I'm curious about what you were just saying about the COVID realities changing how we can do things is sort of a segue to the question that was on my mind. Some of the earlier things you were saying in your longer talk were about, for lack of a better word, sort of evaluating where we are with the polity restructure of the denomination, as some on this call know, many on this call may know, I'm new to the region as of this past year from the UCC in the United States. And so all of these structures are completely brand new to me and all of these ways of doing things. But and as I've observed the hand wringing that goes on some of the Facebook groups and so on and so forth, it's just always occurring to me, how do we try to puzzle out which pieces of our dissatisfactions are due to the structures and which pieces of our dissatisfactions are due to the pandemic, or have been at least exacerbated by the pandemic in the way that perhaps new structures have not been able to fulfill what we'd hoped for them to. To what degree does that distinction matter? Maybe it doesn't matter what's at root of the cause, but we just need to adjust it and try something different. I'm just curious about if you have any reflections that sort of relate to how we evaluate, adjust, seek the better in this moment, recognizing that this moment has the significant influence of the pandemic on this moment as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, Matt. So there's a couple of things. Since Blair's already let the cat out of the bag, that I like to read and learn things. One of the best books that I read in 2021 is called Mission Economy: A Moonshot Guide to Changing Capitalism by an Italian economist that works at the University College of London. And she's also been hired by the BC government to help advise on our Restart BC plan. So it's worth a read if you're politically engaged in our province. But she talks about how traditionally governments have succeeded or failed in achieving the changes that it wanted to achieve. Was the difference between looking at an issue as a problem or trying to discern what is the outcome you're trying to achieve. And so she uses the Apollo mission as John F. Kennedy could get everybody rallied around, we are going to put a man on the moon within 10 years. And that there was this very strong vision for what he wanted to create. And there was all the military industrial complex and security reasons behind that. But, everybody was so bought into that vision. So there's that, historical or famous story of one of the top politicians in the US going to the headquarters at NASA and saying to one of the janitors, "What do you do here?" And he said, "Well, I'm working to put a man on the moon, sir." And that we are able to achieve these really amazing collective innovations when we're focused on the outcome we're trying to create. Whereas when we look at a problem we're trying to solve, we've already prescribed what our options are in a way that we don't even realize. It's almost subconscious. And, I think that when we look at the things that we're learning about brain science and, the interactions between the prefrontal cortex, where we have our executive function and make decisions, and the limbic system, which is where we respond to threat, so much of our world is creating these threats that our bodies can't discern as being different from physical threat, right? When we have job insecurity or housing insecurity, or any kind of social threat, our physical reaction is still the same as if there's a tiger at my door. So one of the personal mindfulness techniques my doctor told me is called the SOTA technique. So you stop, observe, detach, and affirm. So you stop and be like, "Oh, I'm stressed. There is something that is stressing me out. I notice that my body is reacting. My blood pressure is going up. I'm feeling anxious or, in my body." I can stop, take a breath, and just affirm, there's no tiger at my door. And I think that our brains work better when we are in a place of openness and curiosity, engaging that prefrontal cortex. And so I think that's one of the reasons why this message of hope, and hope even in the face of not knowing what is the possibility to be hoped for, and that lack of clarity, if we can see that lack of clarity as an opportunity to co-create together and with God what future we want to work towards, we're in that place of our executive function and our prefrontal cortex together. And when we're looking at a problem we have to fix, that problem is a threat to us. And so we're closed off and we're positional. And so it's not surprising, like, I don't know if it answers your question, but I think that when it's kind of a moot point to ask what is the structure of the church and what is COVID, like there is so much threat, like our bodies are just in threat overwhelm. And some of it is physical threat, and a lot of it is physical threat right now with COVID, but there's the social threat of, I don't know where I fit in this new structure, and our bodies don't know the difference. So I think it's a both and question. And I think that we need to find ways collectively to do that sort of technique, right? Like just stop, observe, detach, and affirm, right? Like we are working towards a co-creation of a new kingdom like God on earth. So that's the big picture.
Ross, you had a question.
Yeah.
Yes. Congratulations, Dr. Lansdowne, on the recognition of your time and effort and abilities within the church. Along those lines, I was wondering how you feel your possible and hopeful nomination to moderator is going to affect the life that you lead at the moment. For example, the First United Church Community Ministry, the social housing, Vancouver Foundation, the Sandy Salter system, the Indigenous Board, the Candidacy Board, plus, of course, as you've already mentioned, some of the issues and struggles that are currently in your own personal life. How is this all going to balance going forward?
Thanks, Ross. This is a good question. In some ways, I think it'll make it simpler. This is actually a so Trina is also the staff person for the General Counsel Office who is tasked with supporting candidates for moderator. And so I took that as an invitation to mean I could ask her clarifying questions about like, what if? And so one of the questions I asked yesterday is like, hey, what does this mean in terms of, you know, the Indigenous Office or Minister of Vocation had already clarified that if I was elected moderator, I would not be able to be on that, the candidacy board anymore. But Trina also informed me yesterday that would mean I would have to step down from the board of Sandy Social Center. And I think she's checking, double checking. I don't necessarily know that that would mean I would have to step off the Vancouver Foundation because it's sort of arm's length. And really in terms of like the experiences that I've had on boards, it's not a super heavy lift in terms of time commitment. It's they operate at a very, very high level. Most of the work of the foundation is handled by a very confident and skilled staff. So in some ways, it, you know, I'd be required or able to focus my attention a little bit more on my day job in a way, you know, more than I have in the last little while. And I'm really lucky in that my partner, this is a whole other long story I won't get into because we'd be here for days, but my partner just emigrated to Canada like 3 days before the border closed. And so has been at home with the children. He's just received his permanent residency. And so part of our discernment has been around like not him rushing to find like where his place is going to be. And he's networking and spending time in discernment. But, you know, we have been able to work really well with him, primarily working at home and parenting, you know, being responsible for all of the like kid duties and the cooking and the shopping and things like that. And so he very graciously has, you know, agreed that he'll wait and see the results of the election before he decides what his work life will look like next. And that is a huge gift to me from my partner because willing to work around this call to service from the church rather than having us have to have competing career goals at this time or like career impacts, I guess, the impacts of our careers on our family. And you know, my name in Kwakwala is Kwisala, which means woman who travels to places far away. And I definitely have passed on the travel bug gene to my children. And so, so far they are okay with the carrot of they will get to come on some trips with me. And as much as they don't like it when I'm like stay at work late, or if I have to be away for work, they're excited about the fact that that will be balanced with more opportunity to travel with mom.
Thank you.
There
Okay, I
are
have some
three.
questions in the chat, and then Dave has his hand up. So let's do one of the questions in the chat from Bruce McCandless Davis. Many of us have been grappling with what it means to decolonize the church and faith. What do you think are the most important steps we as a denomination and as local communities of faith need to take for that to happen? I know that's a big question, so you can't take the whole remaining 15 minutes to answer it.
So again, I go back to that concept for mission economy, right? Like my experience in the church when I've been a participant in conversations within the Indigenous church, or when I am asked about my perspective, like not as an ordained minister necessarily, but specifically as an Indigenous woman, has been like, you know, what does this look like? And then the Indigenous church, and I think this has been true for the last 40 or 50 years, the Indigenous church will say, well, this is what we want. So we're like, well, that can't, that's not, like, we can't do that. Or how would that work exactly? And I think, like, knowing what I know now, that goes back to that idea of like trying to solve a problem versus seeking an outcome together. I think the amount of fiction and film and poetry that is coming out of Indigenous Canada right now gives me so much hope, because people connect with those stories so much more viscerally than they do with like discussions about structural racism. And I think that engaging with the story of colonization, engaging with the story of the impacts of colonization and what that looks like generationally, like, you know, to have somebody get up and say like, well, structurally, this is how this like has created generational trauma, is very different than reading Five Little Indians, right? So my hope is, and what I love about the United Church is, in so many myriad ways, we are a community and a community of faith of learners, right? Like I have never, in any of the United Church congregations that I've been involved in, I've never met communities of faith that don't have a book club or don't watch movies together or aren't always in some ways engaging with like learning about this world that we live in and the ways that it's changing and what does that mean for us in our faith journey. So that actually gives me a lot of hope. I think we could be stronger on reclaiming our commitment to social justice and like recentering our voice as one of moral authority and why this is important for Canada. You know, I feel like the last 10 to 15 years we've been, if we talk about Janet Gear's like 5 marks of the church, right? We've been in this place of like contemplation and discernment and prayer and looking at the ecclesial side of like, what does our structure look like? And maybe it's time to move more to the ecumenical and the missional a little bit, given all of the ways that injustices are impacting people across the country. I worry really deeply about housing affordability, not just for the homeless in the downtown east side, but for all Canadians. So I think that reconciliation and the church having something to say about why this is a moral obligation for any Canadian, regardless of their faith background, is something that I would love to see the church do more broadly. And I think First United's, you know, we're really putting our money and our effort and our time where our theology is on that. So I'm proud of that.
Great, thanks. The next question in the chat is kind of related, so I'll do that next, and then Dave, and then Max. So how do you imagine that the Indigenous church and this is from Marilyn Carroll, from her experience, the rural church can be re-anchored in the UCC?
She's shaking.
That's a tough one. I think I've been in conversations with the founders of a new organization in the downtown east side around, they have this audacious goal to like help the 300 hardest cases, right? And my view is, unless you design a continuum of care that puts a young, Indigenous, homeless, drug addicted, mentally ill, subsistence sex worker as like the person that all of your care can serve, no matter what programs you put into place, there will always be somebody who falls through the cracks or who is underneath the safety net that you were trying to create, because that person, whoever she is the most marginalized person in this community. And if you don't create a system that works for her, it's not going to work for the 300 most hardest cases, because half of those 300 cases are her. And I feel like, again, going back to this point of, the church continuing asking the Indigenous church, what do you want? And then the Indigenous church saying what we need, and then saying, well, that doesn't really work. I think I'm really interested in being led by the experience of the rural church and the experience of the Indigenous church, and designing a church that works for those two constituents first, because if it works for them, it will work for the rest of us that live in urban centers or that have stronger and more vibrant communities of faith that are able to call ministry personnel with more ease. Like, it's mind-blowing to me that in the former Manitoba Northwest Conference, I don't know their new regional name, that's what I'm like leaning into this learning thing, 70% of pastoral charges who can afford ministry personnel can't call somebody. Like, our system is not working, and maybe that's like going on a campaign to theological schools and saying like, hey, here's the benefits of living in rural Canada. And I did my internship in rural Canada. I think there's lots of them. I know Dave did too, so I'm interested to hear what he says next. But, I think that we have to center their needs if we want to re-anchor them in the church, because otherwise it's going to, they're going to get the leftovers from what the rest of us want.
Thank you, Dave.
Carmen, I just, when I heard that you'd been nominated and accepted, honestly, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, oh my, not because it's you, but because it's you. I think we expect too much of our moderators, and it grew from the early days. The moderator role grew into a more Pope-like role of flying people all over the place and having to be everywhere and represent the whole church and all that stuff. So I don't mean to be rude, but we kind of knocked the stuffing out of our moderators. So on your journey to the role, I will continue to pray for your mental and physical health, because just getting to it could be, as you know, tough. But I really hope that some of the thoughts you had about remodeling what moderators do, where they work, and how much they have to work, I hope that'll start to sink into the church, so that we can expect moderators from many different backgrounds and lifestyles to be able to serve without giving up so much. And last time around, I had a kind of thought about a co-moderator, and I don't know if the general council's ever thought about that, but I don't think it would go wrong if we had co-moderators to share that big load, especially the travel load, representing the church off in varied places. But that was just a thought that came back to my mind when I think about not being in Toronto for a third and not traveling a third and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, listening to you today again, something I've noticed over the last bunch of years where I've known the moderators personally and then publicly is, I find the United Church of Canada communications team sucks the life out of them on screen. And so if we're going to maintain this on-screen stuff, I sure hope they let you be Carmen a little more than the pre-written scripts that then kind of take it all away. Because I think when we elect a moderator, we elect them based on what we've seen of that person and their authentic self. So I don't know what the trick to that is, but I sure hope that well, I know the church will get to see you on the run to moderator, and when you become moderator, I hope we get to continue to see you the way we've known you, and you serve with that kind of spirit.
You know, the thing we all learn at some point or another about like the thou shalt nots in the Bible were written because somebody did. And I think like all it took was one moderator to say that like the baby Jesus wasn't divine, and whoop, like everything's on lockdown, right? But that's our human tendency is to like mitigate risk. And you know, I know that is a reality for whoever is elected moderator, that there will be negotiation around what can be said and when and by whom. And, you know, when you look at an organization that has harmed Indigenous communities and women and children and lay people and candidates for ministry, like maybe that's not always such a bad thing either. But maybe it could look more like a diverse community of discernment that like tempers perspectives and brings in other perspectives so that we're not causing harm. So yeah.
Thank you, Carmen. You're very articulate with all your responses. Max.
My question, Carmen, as nominated as a moderator, is in regard to the LGBTQ+2, okay, which affects too the indigenous communities with true spirit. Right now, we have the entity of affirming, national affirming, but for the regular person that attend the church and even that visiting the church, they got a problem and they ask a question that is very legit. Oh, you have two different churches, eh? Yeah, no, actually we are one church, but some congregations are and some congregations are not. Now, I truly appreciate what Blair were doing in the region, in having a region to become affirming, because that sends a whole different message to the memberships in general. I know by experience that it's not easy. I know it's a lot of people that they want to have the traditional church and don't move around. But we also are in different times. And I think pandemic is teaching that lesson to us. We are in different times. So my question to you, in your vision, it is any idea that one day the national affirming become part of the United Church of Canada in the body, no outside the body?
I will live in hope for that day. One of the, you know, I hope that one day First United, and so I'm going to trust this to Heather and Jean and Elizabeth and Jennifer to note it that I said it here. I hope that First United will become an affirming ministry of the United Church of Canada. There's a huge, we are the only faith-based ministry in the downtown east side that does not require celibacy of the queer community. The trans community used to sleep on our loading bay when there was no shelters or services for the trans community in this community. And I think that one of the things that's hard but also important about the affirming process is that it causes you to go through a process of discernment and deep self-examination as a community of faith about what does it mean to be welcoming. In terms of sexual orientation and gender diversity and gender expression and identity, but also more broadly. And I do think that it should, you know, I think the churches, there may still be some communities of faith who struggle with those questions. I think a lot of congregations that used to struggle with what does it mean to be inclusive of the whole people of God, especially around sexual orientation and gender expression and gender identity have shifted. But I also think going through the process is important. And so maybe that's something that we do require of everyone in the future, because that's what allyship looks like. That's what true allyship looks like, is taking doing the hard work of learning all the things and being confronted in the ways in which whatever is normative in the world can create explicit and implicit marginalization of other people. So.
Thank you, Carmen. And we're getting to the end of our time, and I do have a couple of announcements that we want to share. I want to extend my gratitude to you for taking this time out of what I know is an incredibly busy schedule to be with us and to allow us to express our pride in you and the work that you do and what you're offering to the church, and our gratitude for your willingness to do that. And we know that whatever happens, we will be well served by you in your ministry, either in an ongoing way at First United or as the next moderator for the United Church of Canada. So thank you, and blessings to you, and know that we will be praying for you on this journey, and we will pray for you that you know that you are loved and supported by this region, and that we're willing to share with the whole church. So thank you, Carmen. Just a couple of things as we wind up our time together. No updates around COVID or COVID changes of regulations or restrictions, so we didn't dedicate any time to that, but as things come up, we'll let you know, expecting the next update around the Family Day weekend. Will probably loosen restrictions a little bit as we move into the time when the weather is a little better. Although it seems funny saying that when I'm in Okotoks and it's like -30 with the wind chill here, but anyway. Kathy, oops, you just stepped away. Kathy Kreider, who is the executive director for Camp Spirit, wanted to just share where things are at with Camp Spirit right now.
I did, and I'll make it quick. Thank you, Carmen, for mentioning Camp Spirit and the place it's played in your children's experience of church, and that it's positive. They're two of my favorite Camp Spirit campers, I have to say. So a lot is going on with Camp Spirit. A lot of exciting things are happening, and today we posted on the website application, the portal for people to apply for one of 23 summer staff positions with Camp Spirit. So I am putting that in the chat. Take a moment to take a look at the Camp Spirit website and check out the staffing page. And if you know anybody 16 years old or older, young adults, university students looking for meaningful work, please send them to the Camp Spirit website and encourage them to apply. We are going to need a big staff. We're looking at over 30 sites this summer. So really excited. Thanks, Trina.
Great. Yes, and we're really excited with all the work the First Third team is doing and engaging with our young people throughout the whole region. So thank you, and it's great to have you on board. We aren't scrambling quite so much as we did last year, so that's wonderful. Carmen, John is asking, he sent us a direct message, the title of the book that you mentioned. Could you put that in the chat, please? Okay, so
I did a little bit back, so I'll put it again.
Okay, thanks. So I think that's all we've got for today, and it's already after 2. So I'm wondering, Blair, if you would close us with a prayer and a blessing, and then I can hang around after for a couple minutes if people have other questions.
Be happy to. I want to make sure that you can hear me still. I had to change microphones. Yeah. Good. Let's pray together. Our prayer today is thank you, oh God. May we be disciplined that that's our first prayer, and that's thank you. Thank you for leadership that inspires. Thank you for the call of your gospel that inspires us. Thank you for the time that we take to be with each other in this way. Thank you for life in its fullness that you promise. We experience it in glimpses, even in our fatigue. May we leave this place trusting in the words that we hear at baptism. May they continue to be true, that you see each of us as your beloved, held, nurtured, known before we were ever born, before a word was on our lips, that nothing is outside of your concern and care. May we write this in our hearts and have it as a lived experience going into the rest of our day, and as we look forward to the days ahead. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Blair. Two more just quick little things. One is next week's town hall, or 2 weeks from now, the town hall will be a stewardship focus, and Vicki Nelson, our stewardship staff person, is going to do some presentations. And the challenges of COVID have definitely made this aspect of ministry more important. And so I'll encourage you to come and spread the word broadly that might be a real opportunity for support for communities of faith. And then a reminder that the general meeting save the date has gone out, and the meeting will be happening in person in Prince George. And we are really hoping that it'll be possible for us to gather in person, and that we'll be able to meet there in Prince George, but we'll have some contingency plans in place in case that isn't possible. So that's going to be June 9th to 12th. So watch for more details coming up about that, but just mark your calendars. So thanks everyone, and blessings on your day and your week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.